Have you ever talked to someone who's been retired for a few years and asked them what they wish they'd done differently while they were still working? The answers might surprise you because they're usually not what you'd expect. People don't sit around in retirement wishing they'd bought a fancier car or a bigger house or taken more expensive vacations. What they regret are the strategic purchases they put off, the investments they didn't make, and the things they convinced themselves they didn't need until it was too late. These aren't impulse buys or luxury items. These are specific things that would have dramatically improved their retirement experience, saved them money, or made their lives easier. And they're kicking themselves for not buying them sooner when they had the income to do it comfortably. The brutal reality is that most people spend their working years buying the wrong things. They drop thousands on cars that depreciate, clothes they barely wear, restaurants they don't remember, and stuff that ends up in storage or yard sales. Meanwhile, they skip the purchases that would actually pay dividends for decades. Then they hit retirement and realize their mistake, except now they're on a fixed income and it's much harder to afford these things. Or worse, they need these things desperately but can't justify the expense because they're watching every dollar. The regret is real and it's completely avoidable if you know what to prioritize while you're still working. What we're going to talk about today are the 10 things that retirees consistently say they wish they'd bought earlier. These aren't random opinions. These are patterns that show up again and again when you talk to people who've been through the transition from working life to retirement. Some of these purchases save money over time. Some improve quality of life dramatically. Some prevent problems that become much more expensive to solve later. All of them share one thing in common, which is that buying them earlier would have made retirement significantly better, and waiting to buy them was a mistake that cost money, comfort, or both. Let's start with the first thing on the list, and it's going to seem boring, but stick with me because the math on this is compelling. Retirees wish they'd bought quality furniture and home goods earlier instead of constantly replacing cheap stuff. Think about how most people furnish their homes when they're young. They buy the cheapest couch they can find because they're just starting out. A few years later, it's falling apart, so they buy another cheap couch, then another one after that. Over a 30-year period, they might buy 5 or 6 couches, spending $600 to $800 each time, totaling $3,000 to $4,500. Meanwhile, someone who bought one quality couch for $2,000 still has that same couch 30 years later, and it still looks good. This pattern repeats with mattresses, dining tables, desk chairs, kitchen appliances, and dozens of other items. Cheap stuff feels financially smart in the moment because you're spending less upfront, but over decades, you're actually spending way more because you keep replacing things. Retirees look back and realize they spent tens of thousands of dollars over their working years constantly replacing cheap furniture and goods. If it invested in quality pieces earlier, they would have spent less money total and they'd have nicer stuff throughout their lives. Plus, they wouldn't be entering retirement with furniture that's worn out and needing replacement right when their income drops. The second thing retirees wish they bought earlier is a reliable, fuel-efficient vehicle and then driven it into the ground. This goes against everything car culture tells you about upgrading every few years, but the math is absolutely brutal on constant car purchases. The average new car payment in America is over $700 per month. Over a 40-year working career, if you constantly have a car payment, you'll spend over $336,000 just on car payments. That's not including insurance, gas, and maintenance. That's just the payment itself. $250,000 evaporated into a depreciating asset. Now imagine a different approach. You buy a reliable used car for $15,000 when you're 25. You drive it for 15 years, maintaining it properly. You spend maybe $8,000 over those 15 years on maintenance and repairs. At 40, you buy another reliable used car for $18,000 and drive it for another 15 years with maybe $10,000 in maintenance. At 55, you buy one more for $20,000 and drive it until retirement and beyond. Total spent on vehicles over 40 years is about $71,000, including maintenance. You saved $265,000 compared to the person who always had a car payment, and you got to the exact same destination. They just looked cooler doing it while going broke. Retirees understand this in hindsight. They look back at all the car payments they made over the years and realize that money could have been invested or saved. They wish they'd bought one decent car in their 30s and just kept it running instead of constantly upgrading to impress people who didn't care. The retired person driving a 20-year-old paid-off car is way more financially secure than the retired person making payments on a 3-year-old vehicle, but it took them decades to learn this lesson. The third thing retirees wish they'd bought earlier is proper insurance coverage. This includes adequate health insurance, disability insurance when they were working, umbrella liability insurance, and long-term care insurance. When you're young and healthy, insurance feels like a waste of money. You're paying premiums for coverage you're not using, and it's tempting to just get the minimum required or skip optional coverage entirely. Then something happens, a health crisis, an accident, a lawsuit, and suddenly you realize that saving a few $100s a month on premiums is costing you tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands in out-of-pocket expenses. The long-term care insurance decision is one that haunts a lot of retirees. Long-term care, whether it's in home care, assisted living, or nursing home care, is incredibly expensive. We're talking $5,000 to $10,000 per month or more. Most people will need some level of long-term care eventually, and Medicare doesn't cover most of it. Long-term care insurance bought in your 50s might cost $200 to $300 per month. Bought in your 60s, it might cost $400 to $500 per month. Wait until your 70s, and it might be $800 per month, or you might not even qualify anymore due to health issues. Retirees who bought long-term care insurance in their 50s paid maybe $2,000 to $3,000 per year for coverage that saves them $60,000 to $120,000 per year if they need care. Retirees who skipped it to save the premium are now either depleting their life savings paying for care out of pocket, or they're relying on family members to provide care, which creates emotional and financial strain on everyone. The regret of not buying this coverage when it was affordable is something you hear constantly from people in their 70s and 80s. The fourth thing on the list is home improvements and updates while they still had the income to afford them comfortably. This includes things like replacing the roof before it starts leaking, updating the HVAC system before it dies, remodeling the bathroom to be more accessible, and making the home more energy efficient. When you're working and bringing in a steady income, a $10,000 home improvement project feels manageable. You can save up for it over a year or put it on a credit card and pay it off over several months without too much stress. But retirees are on fixed incomes, and that same $10,000 project becomes a financial crisis. They don't have the cash flow to save up for it quickly. They can't easily increase their income to cover the expense. So what happens is they defer necessary maintenance and improvements because they can't afford them, which leads to bigger problems down the road. The roof that should have been replaced starts leaking, and now there's water damage to fix. The inefficient HVAC system keeps running up huge utility bills that strain the budget every month. The bathroom that wasn't updated becomes dangerous as mobility decreases, leading to falls and injuries. Retirees wish they'd been more proactive about home improvements and maintenance during their working years. They wish they'd replaced things on their timeline when they could afford it, rather than waiting until things broke and being forced to deal with it on an emergency basis during retirement. The advice they give is to handle all major home systems and improvements before you retire. New roof, new HVAC, updated electrical and plumbing, energy-efficient windows, accessible bathroom, whatever your home needs, do it while you're still working. Don't retire into a house that's going to nickel and dime you to death with repairs and maintenance you can't afford. The fifth thing retirees wish they'd bought is quality tools and equipment for hobbies and home maintenance. This might seem like a small thing, but it matters more than you'd think. When you're working full-time, you don't have as much time for hobbies or home projects, so you make do with mediocre tools. You buy the cheap lawnmower, the basic tool set, the entry-level camera or golf clubs or whatever equipment your hobby requires. Then you retire, and suddenly you have all this time to pursue interests, and you're stuck with inadequate equipment that makes the activity less enjoyable or limits what you can do. The retiree who wants to do woodworking projects is stuck with a cheap saw and drill that don't perform well. The retiree who wants to pursue photography is using an old camera that can't capture the shots they want. The retiree who loves gardening is dealing with tools that break or don't work properly. They could upgrade now, but spending $500 or $1,000 on hobby equipment feels irresponsible when they're watching every dollar of their fixed income. So they either skip the hobby they enjoy, or they do it with subpar equipment and don't get as much satisfaction from it. The advice from people who've been through this is to invest in good equipment for the hobbies and activities you plan to pursue in retirement while you still have the income to do it comfortably. Don't wait until retirement to buy the things that will bring you joy and keep you active. Buy them in your 50s when you can afford them easily, and then you'll have quality equipment ready to go the day you retire. The same goes for home maintenance equipment. Buy the quality lawnmower, the good ladder, the proper tools. These things last for decades if you buy quality, and having them available makes home maintenance easier and safer throughout retirement. The sixth thing on the list is experiences and travel while they were still physically able to fully enjoy them. This is different from the other items because it's not about buying a physical object. It's about prioritizing certain purchases earlier in life when you can get more value from them. A lot of people spend their working years telling themselves they'll travel and have adventures once they retire and have all this free time. They defer experiences because they're focused on building wealth and they don't want to spend money on what feels like frivolous things. Then they retire, and one of two things happens. Either they're not in good enough physical condition to do the things they wanted to do, or they're so anxious about spending money on a fixed income that they can't bring themselves to splurge on travel and experiences. The 70-year-old who always wanted to hike Machu Picchu discovers their knees can't handle it anymore. The 68-year-old who dreamed of touring Europe is too worried about spending $5,000 on the trip to actually book it. The experiences they deferred are now out of reach, either physically or psychologically. Retirees wish they'd taken some of those trips and had some of those experiences in their 50s when they were still healthy and earning good money. They wish they hadn't deferred all the fun until retirement. The advice they give is to build adventure and experience into your life throughout your working years, especially in your 50s and early 60s. Don't wait until retirement to start living. Take the trip, sign up for the class, have the experience. You can't buy back your physical capability or your time. A trip you take at 55 when you're healthy is worth more than the same trip at 75 when you're dealing with health issues, even if the trip costs the same amount of money. The seventh thing retirees wish they'd bought earlier is a smaller, more manageable home in a location that supports the retirement lifestyle they want. A lot of people stay in the family home way too long. They raise their kids there, it's familiar, and they can't imagine living anywhere else. So they keep the 2,500 square foot, 4-bedroom house long after the kids move out. They're maintaining all that space, paying property taxes on all that square footage, and dealing with stairs and yard work and upkeep that becomes progressively more difficult as they age. Then they hit 70 and realize they need to downsize, but now the process is overwhelming. They've accumulated 30 years of stuff. The real estate market might not be favorable. Moving at 70 is physically and emotionally exhausting in a way that moving at 55 isn't. Or worse, they wait until a health crisis forces a move, and now they're making decisions under duress and stress. Retirees wish they downsized in their late 50s or early 60s while they still had the energy to sort through belongings, handle the logistics of moving, and set up a new home the way they wanted it. The same regret applies to location. People who retired in expensive areas often wish they'd moved to a more affordable location earlier. Someone who worked in San Francisco or New York and retired there is dealing with property taxes, insurance, and general cost of living that consumes a huge portion of their retirement income. If they'd moved to a lower-cost state in their early 60s, they could have sold their expensive home, bought something cheaper, and banked the difference to improve their retirement security. But moving away from where you've lived for decades becomes progressively harder as you age and build deeper roots. The eighth thing on the list is dental work. This one surprises people, but it comes up constantly when you talk to retirees. Dental issues that were minor problems in your 40s and 50s become major problems in your 70s and 80s. That tooth that probably needed a crown 10 years ago now needs to be extracted. The gum disease that wasn't quite bad enough to treat aggressively has now led to bone loss and multiple tooth problems. Dental insurance for retirees is often minimal or non-existent, and procedures are expensive. A dental implant can cost $3,000 to $5,000. Full mouth reconstruction can be $30,000 or more. Retirees wish they'd been more aggressive about dental care in their 50s and early 60s while they still had good dental insurance through their employer. They wish they'd gotten crowns on questionable teeth before they broke. They wish they'd done the expensive periodontal treatment to save their gums. They wish they'd addressed cosmetic issues that now affect their confidence and willingness to socialize. The advice is clear. Take care of your teeth aggressively before you retire. Get any necessary dental work done while you have insurance and income. Don't defer treatments that will only become more necessary and more expensive later. The ninth thing retirees wish they'd bought is comprehensive financial planning and advice earlier in life. A lot of people try to figure out retirement planning on their own, or they don't think about it seriously until they're within a few years of retirement age. They make mistakes along the way that cost them money. They don't optimize their tax situation. They don't understand Social Security claiming strategies. They don't have an efficient withdrawal strategy for their retirement accounts. They're not properly diversified. They paid too much in fees for decades because they didn't know what they didn't know. Someone who works with a qualified financial planner starting in their 40s can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to their lifetime wealth through better decisions about taxes, investing, insurance, and retirement planning. The cost of financial advice, maybe $2,000 to $5,000 per year, pays for itself many times over through the value of better decisions. But people skip this expense because it feels like a lot of money and they don't understand the value they're missing. Then they hit retirement and realize they left a ton of money on the table through inefficient planning over the years. The regret is especially strong around Social Security timing. The difference between claiming Social Security at 62 versus waiting until 70 can be $100,000 or more in lifetime benefits, but most people don't understand this. They claim early without realizing what it costs them. A financial planner would have helped them understand the math and make a better decision. Same with retirement account withdrawals. The order you withdraw from different account types, traditional IRA versus Roth versus taxable accounts, can save tens of thousands in taxes over a retirement. But people who are figuring this out on their own usually get it wrong. The 10th and final thing retirees wish they'd bought earlier is life insurance and estate planning documents. When you're young, it's easy to tell yourself you'll deal with this stuff later. You don't want to think about death or disability. You don't want to spend money on something morbid. So you skip the life insurance, or you only have a minimal policy through work. You don't create a will or set up power of attorney documents or write a healthcare directive. You figure you'll get around to it eventually. Then eventually comes and you're 65 and life insurance is now incredibly expensive if you can even qualify for it. Creating estate planning documents feels urgent now that you're older, but it's something you should have done decades ago. If something happens before you get it done, your family is left dealing with a legal and financial mess. The retiree who bought a 30-year term life insurance policy at age 35 for $30 per month protected their family for 3 decades at a total cost of about $11,000. The retiree who waited until 55 to buy coverage is paying $200 per month for less coverage, and the total cost over time is way higher. Estate planning is similar. The cost to set up basic documents, a will, power of attorney, healthcare directive, and maybe a simple trust, might be $1,500 to $3,000. Do this in your 40s and you're protected for decades. Wait until your 70s and the documents are more complicated because your financial situation is more complex, it costs more, and there's a higher chance something happens before you get it done. Retirees wish they'd handled this administrative stuff in their 40s or 50s when it was simpler and less emotionally charged. So there you have it, the 10 things retirees wish they'd bought earlier. Quality furniture and goods that last instead of constantly replacing cheap stuff. A reliable vehicle bought smart and driven into the ground. Proper insurance coverage, including long-term care insurance. Home improvements and updates done while they had the income. Quality tools and equipment for hobbies and maintenance. Experiences and travel while physically capable of enjoying them. A smaller, more manageable home in a retirement-friendly location, dental work while they had good insurance, financial planning and advice throughout their career, and life insurance and estate planning documents done early and properly. The common thread through all of these is that they either save money over time, prevent bigger problems later, or enhance quality of life in ways that can't be achieved after retirement. These aren't frivolous purchases. These are strategic investments in your future comfort and security. The retirees who made these purchases early are the ones living comfortably and confidently in retirement. The ones who skipped them are dealing with regret and financial stress that could have been avoided. The question is which group you're going to be in, and that decision is being made right now through the choices you're making today about what to buy and what to prioritize. Learn from the people who've already been through it. They're telling you exactly what they wish they'd done differently. The only question is whether you're listening.